Contrary to what we might think, young people, in my opinion, are not the leaders of tomorrow. They're leading right now, today.
There is a fake rule in philanthropy, and the fake rule is youth don't know enough to shape the future of our democracy. And I think the real rule is youth often see and act on what others can't or won't.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Break Fake Rules. How about that? I'm coming in with a nice, slow Break Fake Rules. We're excited to be back together. We've got our awesome co-host today, Mr. Ralph Lewin. Ralph, I think the last time people saw you, you were taking over this show. No one called me to tell me about it. All of a sudden, I was out. I thought maybe I was done. I thought maybe Break Fake Rules and Glen Galaich were over with. What happened?
Well, hey, the jury's still out, Glen. It was a great show. I mean, we had Eric on, we had Jamie, we had Carmen.
Yeah.
The banter was great. We laughed a lot. We took on some serious issues, and it was all spurred by your book, Control. And you lay out so much in there. We had so much to talk about. It was really a great episode, in my humble opinion.
Well, speaking of humbled, I was quite humbled to have you do that. And I'm so grateful. I actually got up that morning, and the first thing I did was I went right to the podcast. I went right to Break Fake Rules. I was so curious as to what you all had to say about it. And I think what's really great about it, which is what I love about the show, and I certainly love about the friendships I have with all of you. You know, you didn't go lightly on me. You had some really strong opinions. Very positive, many of them, which I appreciate, and very challenging, some of them, which I appreciate. And I thought that was a great way to start the day. It kind of like grounded the author that day, I can tell you that.
Well, I think that's a good sign of not only good friendships, but great colleagues in that they are honest with you and share their thoughts about your work in a way that is critical, but also uplifting. And I think that was the spirit with which we took over Break Fake Rules.
So today we've got Josh Lee on with us. He's the head of the Youth Power Fund. I'm very much looking forward to kind of hearing his take on what happens when a young person has the ability to move grants at a young age. How old were you, Ralph, when you made your first grant?
Oh, gosh. I think 26, I started working for an organization at that time called the California Council for the Humanities, which was an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And it was a surreal experience, the idea that you could move money to support things that mattered, that you believed mattered. It felt very powerful at 26. How about you?
The first time I made one, I was just 45 years old, and working for an organization called the Stupski Foundation.
Uh-huh.
And within about 5 years, I realized, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And so I really love the Youth Power Fund for the fact that young people are influencing the way grants are made. You know, obviously when a grant goes out, it goes out to an organization. The organization provides a service or a product or a policy. That's all going to influence other people. Like what impact does that have on a young person as they grow into other roles later in life? And so I say that coming from a place of wishing I had that same experience in my early 20s. I wonder what kind of a grant maker I would be today. You know, I'm sure it's made a difference. And you just even backed that up yourself. 26, your first one.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember just having these intense feelings of, I guess they call it imposter syndrome. Why should I have that kind of power? And then I kind of looked around and asked myself, well, why should they have that kind of power?
There you go.
And kind of stepped into that role. Of course, that to this day, that sense of imposter syndrome, lingers from time to time. But I think it's a good question about who has the power to make decisions that affect other people's lives in terms of providing services that matter. I love what Josh is doing to kind of broaden the playing field, to democratize the decision making in a sense. I think it's really important.
And if there's anyone that knows about democracy, that's you, Ralph. That's an area you work in. You and I assume, I'm more than assume, I'm pretty sure the evidence suggests this, that Peter Haas, who you work with, shares the same belief in democracy. I'm a big fan of elections, not only for the distribution of power and decision making and all that, but I crave survey data that is hard to upend. And elections give you a pretty amazing sample of the country and gives you a sense of where people are as a country. We're headed into another one of these. So what are you sensing out there as a funder in the democracy space, as we call it? What are you seeing out there?
Well, there's so much happening right now, Glenn. And I think, it's interesting bringing it back to philanthropy, and then I'd like to bring it back to Josh. I think partly because there's so much happening that there's a little bit of paralysis. I mean, some philanthropists are doing amazing work and getting money out the door to people who are making a difference, but there's so much happening. Philanthropists like to make the right decision, and there isn't a right decision right now. There are many right decisions in terms of what you could be supporting. So I see some people in philanthropy a little frozen in this moment. Bringing it to Josh, I'm really interested in what he has to say. And I'm really curious in this moment. People are talking a lot about student organizing, youth organizing leading into the midterm elections. And I think there is a fake rule in philanthropy. And the fake rule is youth don't know enough to shape the future of our democracy. And I think the real rule is youth often see and act on what others can't or won't and are essential for driving democratic progress. I mean, you think about moments where our country has expanded in how we practice our democracy. I imagine Josh will talk about the civil rights movement. You think about Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, and it was the young people, many of them high school ages, who stepped forward and became known as the Children's Crusade. They marched, they were arrested, they faced fire hoses and police dogs. We're not seeing that quite at the same level, but maybe we are today, and maybe we will in the coming months leading into the midterms. I was struck, Glenn, even where we live in Marin County. I was sitting at my desk one day and I heard these young people shouting out. This was midday, maybe around 10 a.m. And I walk out to the street, and across the street from me is White Hill Middle School. So these are junior high school kids. And they have in their hands signs like "Ice melts." They're protesting what is happening in Minnesota. And it was just so heartening that organically these young people saw something that was wrong and saw that some parts of our society were speaking out against it, but not enough. And so organically across the nation, young people took to the streets, they shut down their schools and said, hey, pay attention. And that's what young people can do. They can take risks, they can be the conscience of our nation, and we should listen to them. So I'm excited about what's going to happen in the next few months, what role young people are going to play in leading into the midterm elections. I think they're going to play a significant role.
Well, I want to bring up something a little provocative here that I don't know if we'll have time to get into with Josh. But I'm a progressive. I think that's where I lean. And we take a lot of credit for organizing. We talk a lot about organizing. Josh, I'm sure, will talk about organizing. And we talk about it from the perspective of progressives. But something I do think needs to be recognized here and acknowledged is that one of the most powerful youth organizing movements we've seen came from the now deceased Charlie Kirk and Turning Points USA.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest with you, since I don't lean that direction, I'm not exactly sure what their message was other than more of the same. Protecting, my understanding is Christian values in the United States was a big part of this. I imagine they were highly anti-immigration because they lined up with the current presidency and in many ways took credit for it. And that's the point. Even the president of the United States says he would not have been president were it not for Turning Points USA. That is a young person's movement. And I wonder, given that, how progressive youth organizing is taking anything into consideration as to how Turning Points did it. I mean, that's a gigantic organization. They are on so many college campuses now. I don't know of one of similar size that exists in the progressive community. So youth organizing can go both ways. It's very present. And we've seen, as you demonstrate, as you pointed out and illustrated, civil rights era, of course, the Vietnam era. We have the right to vote going down to 18 years because of a movement of young people during that time. And you see a powerful moment of youth organizing from the right that has dramatically changed the trajectory. So you can't ignore the youth, they say.
No.
And I think Josh will make that clear.
Such a good point. Glenn, can you tell me and the listeners a little bit about what Stupski Foundation is doing around engaging youth in grant making or other ways in the work of the foundation?
Well, it'll come as no surprise that we've had a relationship with the Youth Power Fund for a while because we have program officers at Stupski who, when they came into their positions, said, we need more input from the communities with whom we operate. And we have a very large post-secondary success program. It's the largest program at Stupski. And the idea behind it is that we invest in support services, navigation services, which means helping young people find resources they need to get into and through college. So this is where we really put our emphasis. And our program officers, one who's been on Break Fake Rules before, Malila Becton-Consuegra, came up with the idea that we create an internship program. And she said, I want an internship program so that we are getting ideas from these young people so that they are involved in the foundation. And in many cases, they do what Josh will talk about, and that is advise, if not even actually make grants on behalf of our post-secondary success program. This internship program is going to go down as one of the more successful programs we've had at Stupski. We've actually hired 2 people full-time into Stupski from it. One is a program manager, who's also on the show, Ari Dada. And then we have another one running our grant-making process right now, and that's Stacy Lopez. So we've really benefited from the internship program in terms of an operation, but also is a big part of how we ensure we're getting that voice in there. And I don't want to go too far into what Stupski does because I'm confident Josh will kind of get into how this plays out and how it works at Youth Power Fund. It's similar for us. It's just been terrific. It's been just an incredible benefit of being at Stupski to be part of it. So I'm a fan of the young people. I'm in. Count me in.
You're too cool, Glenn. You're too cool.
I try. I know. I'm glad you recognize
You're adjacent cool, maybe. How about that?
That's the best I can get. I'll take it.
Well, I am so excited about having the chance to talk with Josh Lee. I met him briefly at your book launch, Glenn, and immediately was just impressed in that conversation by the ideas he brought and can't wait to hear what he brings to Break Fake Rules.
All right, let's bring him on. All right, as we have already told you, we're going to have with us now Josh Lee, the director of the California Youth Power Fund. Josh, thank you so much for coming on to Break Fake Rules.
Thank you, Glenn and Ralph, for having me. Really appreciate all you've done with this podcast and on YouTube, and super excited to talk about breaking fake rules today.
So, Josh, you're working with young people, and I guess my question is, why should young people be involved with grant funding decisions? Are they now? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I mean, taking a lot from Glenn's book around control, a lot of what you suggest, Glenn, in that we've thought about for a long time is this concept around sharing power. And in particular, the way that I understand what you've written and the way that I've understood what sharing power means for the long haul is that it's not just to us at Youth Power Fund. Sharing power is not just about the right thing to do or, the best thing for young people. It is those things, don't get me wrong there. But sharing power actually gets us better outcomes. They're on the spectrum of consolidating power versus sharing power. I don't think in our history we've seen many strong outcomes that are beneficial for the most people on the consolidated power side.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that we really feel and practice that those closest to the problem, those that are most vulnerable, have the best solutions to that problem. So we have to involve them every step of the way for our decisions, particularly where it comes to resources. And where it comes to resources, I think is where those guardrails are up the highest. We often include or try to include in our society ideas from marginalized communities and from vulnerable populations for a number of different things, but not really when it comes to money. When it comes to money, I think is where people sometimes draw a line. And so for us, if we're going to be through and through about what we believe, then we absolutely have to involve young people where it matters most, where the resources are going, especially as a collaborative fund that redistributes, close to 90% of what we fundraise. We would not know best of what to do with that funding without insight and recommendations from young people. Some other reasons why we include young people is that in addition to them being closest to the problem and them understanding problems in a different way because of their proximity to it, we include young people in decision making because our belief is that their framework, their experience, where they are at in their lives actually gives them more insight into what's possible than maybe some of us in our age. Some of us in our age, and I know I might look or present younger, but I'm in my 40s. And I'm stuck on some things. I've been socialized in a way where I understand this is the way it is and it's not going to change. High school students and young adults and transitional age youth, they haven't been stuck. They're not in that stuck space in the same way that the three of us are.
So, Josh, I think what you just described is the beauty of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the decision-making process around funders, right? Blind spots that can exist amongst traditional funders, old guys like myself who don't know what's happening amongst young people, diverse opinions and the perspectives, and maybe find things in the mix of opportunities that I might have missed as a funder.
Yeah.
And then the ability to keep everyone's voices at an even level to where everyone can be heard. I just like to remind people that that is the objective of DEI. It's not just what our Secretary of Defense defines it as. So coming back to that point, what are some of the larger lessons about community representation that's impacted by this approach? Like, what are you seeing?
To your point, it takes intention and effort to bring in other voices, which means that there's some sort of rule being broken in some sense, or some sort of socialization that's being challenged. I mean, I have seen in a review committee of maybe 6 young people and 5 program officers. And mind you, the program officers and the young people are doing the exact same work on this review. What I saw is 2 completely different decisions from the young people's side and from the program officer's side on 2 of the different recommendations. The young people were for this group being funded, and the program officers were against it. And it was an example of a big blind spot where the young people just saw something about this organization in terms of their need and their value in the community that only they could see. So I know this talks a little bit about what I'd referenced, that there's a perspective that you get that you can't get otherwise because of lived experience when you involve more people in your decision making. But to see it and then for them to push to advocate for their side in a room full of professional, mid-career professional program officers and young people who are doing this for the first time, but understand the groups, understand the ecosystem, understand what young people need, and then for them to advocate to the group of adults, and for those adults to hear it out. I think it changed everyone in the room. It changed the young people because they were able to share their voice and have their voices heard and have their perspective heard, which they will carry throughout the rest of their lives, that they were in this space. And then it changed the program officers who were able to see a different side and working with young people that maybe they hadn't done before either. So not only are you getting the better outcome in terms of the grant decision and recommendation, but you're also changing the thought process and the experience of the people in the room. So that in itself, I think, is just as worthy of an outcome.
So as I've been out talking about the book Control, I've had some people have read it, to my surprise, when I get in the room. And one of the things they ask, I've had several heads of foundations who work with very directly with donors ask me, what steps do we need to take at the foundation to loosen up control and bring community in?
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend, or what have you seen? I mean, those program officers that are willing to be in the room and share the power with the young people, tell us about their characteristics. Tell us about what they've done to get to that place. Because, Josh, that is not a simple road for people who hold this kind of power to take.
Right.
I think what my book is starting to do for people out there is pose a question that many don't want to face, which is first looking in the mirror and saying, I may not be the be-all, end-all to a grant decision or to the way an issue area is developed.
Yeah.
It might be good for me and good for the public stewardship I engage in, to engage outside voices, people who live with these situations that I'm hoping to help. And I need to let them in. And they get there and they're like, I don't know what to do. How do I let them in? What can you share there?
Yeah. We actually need to organize within our foundations to do education, workshops, and bring in folks that have experience to talk about best practices in the field for sharing power and for doing collective decision making and sharing decisions on resources and grants. I think that's one step. I think the other thing that really goes a long way is someone's willingness to be experimental. Even as I share with you these stories about what we've done, we're still learning. We're not shy about saying that we're still learning. And we understand that in order to make long-term and sustainable change, we are going to have to experiment. We're going to have to make some mistakes, and we're going to have to learn and adjust. Within philanthropy, we often have, pilot phases of grant one, grant cycle one, et cetera. It's not like the sector is totally immune to experiment and piloting things, but we need to open up just exactly where we're willing to pilot and experiment, particularly when it comes down to where and how resources are distributed.
That's great, Josh. And you've talked about a bunch of fake rules. Which fake rule do you encounter most often from people who are reluctant to involve youth in grant making?
I think that the fake rule I encounter most when it comes to involving young people in grant decisions is just understanding where young people and their value is in our movements, in our society, period. Young people, contrary to what we might think, young people, in my opinion, are not the leaders of tomorrow. They're leading right now, today. They will happen to be the leaders of tomorrow as they get older, but they're already leading. They're already involved in this work, and they actually, throughout our history, the best parts of our movement have been young people. The civil rights era up through now was largely, transitional age youth, for example. But we don't always think about that. In general, there's this overall devaluing of what young people have brought to our societies, and that misses the fact that they are already doing a lot of this work. I think this also matches to what you bring up in the book Control, Glen, about how philanthropy and foundations hold a lot of funding in perpetuity for some future situation. And I think that same layer of thinking misrepresents how we think about young people. I think we are holding off on fully backing young people because we're waiting for them to become the future and invest in them in the future, when they're already doing the work now, when the need is happening right now, and when we can actually prevent many of these problems from continuing to occur in the future with strong and thriving levels of investment now.
So you're talking about very young people making decisions about grants, and grants turn into services and products and policy change in ways that will impact other people's lives in significant ways.
Right.
What does that experience do for them when they are 40, 45, 50?
I've noticed so many times where young people will go to a city council meeting, will advocate for the city council to vote in a certain way, will lose the vote, and young people will leave, and you would think that they'd have their heads down and they wouldn't be excited about what just happened. But instead, because they are upset about and continue to be agitated about the decisions that the adults made, but their relationship with each other, that they all backed each other to stand up and talk for 2 minutes for public comment to a room full of adults, that carries with them, and they actually leave joyful. They leave joyful, and they leave hopeful, and they leave ready to try it again. And I don't see that from most adults. I don't always see 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds trying things, having it not go our way, and being hopeful, energized, and ready to try it again, the way that I see young people. So that experience alone, just witnessing it and remembering what it felt like too, as a young organizer, is what carries through your lifetime.
What we like to do when we wrap up the show, given all your experience with working with young people, working in a power sharing environment, what is the most important fake rule that you encourage people to break?
I think a major fake rule is that you can't do anything without your leadership's approval. And I have to put a lot of disclaimers around this one, because I'm not suggesting that people circumvent their leadership, nor am I anti-leader. I actually think leadership is very hard. And anyone who takes up the challenge of being a leader, that generally deserves a lot of grace. What I'm suggesting with breaking the fake rule about not doing anything without your leader's approval is that I hear too often, I'm not going to be able to do that, or we're not going to be able to do that, or I'm not sure if we can do that because the board won't allow it, or my VP or my CEO is not bought in. When it comes to leadership, philanthropy is so top down. If we're going to change anything about it, we have to organize our leaders. So more what I'm suggesting is that we work to take the time to make the case, continue to organize with the people in our institutions, to do one-on-ones, which is a very basic practice in organizing, with leaders in our institutions, with our CEOs, with our board members, wherever possible. Get creative, and try to figure out ways to bring your leadership on board.
Well, Josh Lee, Director of the California Youth Power Fund, thank you for your leadership, for this conversation, for what you're doing, and really putting youth at the center of our work, asking provocative questions, and doing your part to make our society better. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome, and thanks for encouraging folks to break fake rules.